Good afternoon. I hope everybody is enjoying this second week of LlewellynCon. If you're like me, you've probably discovered you're going to need to add another book to your bookcase to accommodate all the interesting books we've seen and heard about this week. I'm an old time garden columnist, so I'm accustomed to doing a little introduction before I speak. I am JD Walker. I've been practicing pagan for over 20 years. I'm also vice chancellor of the House of Acacia in Greensboro. We organized in 2007 and have been active since then. Uh, Obviously, not so much this past year, but if you're motivated to reach out to me, you can do that at House of Acacia GSO. Acacia is Akasha. So that's House of Acacia GSO. And I'll be happy to talk to you about whatever comes up. If you have questions about this presentation or my book or anything else. I've also been a gardener all of my life. I can't think of a time when gardening wasn't a significant component of my life. I grew up in the foothills of North Carolina, and we grew a lot of our own food. Plus, we frequently harvested food from the wild. Uh, we were a big family, and Mama needed all the help she could get on the grocery bill. I wrote a garden column for 30 years until I retired, and I've written for Llewellyn for roughly 10 years, mostly in their herbal almanac and magical almanacs, and occasionally for the calendars. I'm very pleased to say that my first full book with Llewellyn, published this year, it's called A Witch's Guide to Wildcraft. They did a beautiful work on the cover there. In it, I talk about how to use plants, both wild, cultivated, or what we call landscape plants, to do just about anything you want to do in the magical realm. I also get into details about how to properly harvest them, either practically or magically, how to preserve them, dry them, and then how to store them so that you have access to them long after your harvest. I also help my friend out at her New Age shop. Her husband likes to call it a metaphysical warehouse for people to come, regardless of their tradition, to get anything they need for their spiritual or magical work. Invariably, when people come in, they have questions, and frequently those questions refer to what we call dark or baneful magic. I don't think many of them understand that what they're asking for is something baneful. They're either new to the craft or they might not even be pagans. They're just looking for some kind of solution for a situation in their life. So, what do we mean by baneful? Well, the baneful magic is harmful, it's controlling, and it's frequently destructive. I think most of us got into our spirituality for positive reasons. We wanted a deeper, more personal connection to the divine. And yes, we wanted to bring positive energy into our life, maybe more prosperity, maybe a stronger personal relationship with a significant other. Um, but life is not all peace and light. We know that. At some point, you're going to be confronted with a decision to do or not to do spiritual work that you might rightfully question whether it could fall into that category of dark magic. Now, obviously, we're all adults. We know out and out dark magic when we see it. You see Darth Vader coming, you know it's not going to be a good thing. If you're tempted to make someone miserable for your own amusement, obviously that's dark magic. If you are working to make someone sick or mess with their finances, that's dark magic. But what about those gray areas? A question I frequently hear at my friend's shop is, how do I make this guy or this girl love me? I know we're meant to be together. It's going to be wonderful. They just haven't come to that realization. And I want to make sure that they see that. Uh, the intention is good. You intend to love this person, care for him or her, cater to their needs, create this happily ever after situation. But is that still dark? What if you need to protect yourself? Let's say the situation is you have neighbors who've moved in, they're loud, they're obnoxious, you worry about their late night parties and some of the kind of seedy characters that show up at their house, which is right next to your house. So you do something to cause them to leave. Is that dark magic? How about the situation where you lost a promotion at work or a contract that you were bidding on went to someone else and you feel a need to right that wrong? You work hard, you're a talented individual. You believe that you deserve that contract, but it went to this other person. So you throw some magical monkey wrenches their way. Is that baneful or is that just street justice? Here's one that comes up frequently. Someone has a brother or sister or friend, someone in their social circle who's running with the wrong crowd, they're doing drugs or abusing alcohol. So you decide to bind that person. It's for their own good because they would probably want you to do it if they had sense enough to ask you to do it, but they didn't ask you. So you know better and your intentions are good. So where's the harm? Well, there's this little pesky thing called free will, as in who gets to decide when a person no longer gets to exercise their own free will. Do you have the right to impact that person's life in a way that you see as positive, but in the long run, maybe it's not? This is the gray side. The gray side is usually filled with good intentions, but it's also frequently filled with serious pitfalls. So let's be clear, compelling magic falls into this gray area. Compelling means to force or trick someone into doing something they might not ordinarily do. Maybe they need to do it in your opinion, but they're not doing it. Binding magic falls into this gray area. Here's one you may not have thought about. Glamoury. Glamoury is gray magic. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, um, glamoury is tricking people. It's getting them to see more than what is there. It's getting them to see just the good stuff there and not necessarily the ugly stuff, or it's getting them to believe the hype, so to speak. Uh, Glamoury is still gray. It may be a soft gray, but it's gray magic nonetheless. I know if you've read extensively at all about fairies, you'll see some people who believed that a lot of what fairies did was glamoury. They used fool's gold, they used mirages. I've personally written glamoury spells for friends with the aim of helping that friend put his or her best foot forward. Maybe they were going on a job interview, or maybe they were doing a presentation for a big sales project. Um, this is another one of those instances where the intention is good, but it's still fudging a little bit. Excuse me. Now, my philosophy, and yours may vary, is that there will be times when we need to step into this dark side. But before you do that, I would suggest that you ask yourself this question: have I done all that I can do in the mundane world to fix this problem? I've met people, and I'm sure some of you have too, whose first reaction to any situation is to turn to magic. Uh, that to me is a bit of a cop out. And I completely understand. No one likes confrontation. We don't want to endure the yelling and crying or accusations when we approach a life partner and say, you need to go, or I need to leave. It's easier to turn to a book of shadows and try to force that person to leave without you having to say the words. And I know, for instance, particularly with us ladies, it can be hard to challenge a supervisor at work to ask for a pay increase or an explanation as to why we didn't get a project. We hope that using our magical skills will do the talking for us. In these two specific situations, a better approach is to ask your life partner to go to counseling with you, or to gently say to that person, we need to talk to fix what I see as a problem. And if you want someone out of your life, stop talking to them. I'm constantly amazed to counsel people who say they want to get rid of someone, but they regularly talk to that person on the phone, or they follow them on social media, or they hang out at the same bars and the same events. Before you cut any magical cords, cut the social cords and let them know you are no longer available to them. By the same token, at work, ask for a job review. Explain your interest in improving your chances to get that wage increase or that next promotion. We tend to think of these things as impositions, but this is an expected part of a working relationship. How is your boss going to know that you are interested in moving ahead if you don't tell him or her? We should always look for the mundane solution and give that a chance to work before we reach for the spell jar. But if you have tried the worldly approach and you've gotten nowhere, maybe it is time to complement your work in the everyday world with a little work in the spiritual realm. Before you take that step, I found that it is a good idea to do a little divination work first. I am sure that some of you are familiar with Donald Craig's book, Modern Magic. It's a very good resource. I found my copy in a used bookstore. I think it was printed in 1993. As you can see, it didn't come in this condition. I regularly go back to it either for little bits of information or occasionally just to reread it. On page 20 in his book, he recommended a simple 7 card layout using a tarot deck in which you ask what the outcome of a magical action might be. You're not asking permission. You're not looking for a spirit on the other side to take the responsibility for you. This is not a get out of jail free card that lets you avoid your responsibilities for the action you take. You are still responsible for that. He puts it very nicely in here. Says to formulate your question, it should be in the style of what will be the outcome if I use magic to do yada yada, whatever it is you want to do. Do not ask the cards, should I do such and such? As this puts the responsibility for your actions on the card rather than on you. You should be seeking advice, not asking a pseudo mommy for instructions. It's a very good advice. And by the way, sorry for that loud noise. I just dropped it on the floor here. Um, by the way, this is also a good thing to do, even if you're doing positive magic, just to know where the outcome will be for this particular action. And while we're on the topic, another one that I find is very helpful is this book, Before You Cast a Spell. It's by Carl McColman. It talks about religious ethics and implications, consequences, and stuff. And it's one that I find is handy to have and to refer to. Sometimes I just plain reread it. It's not a long book, and it's very accessible. Um, but you would want to do that before you actually do any kind of spell work, particularly if you're doing baneful spell work. Next, if you have to go gray, try to go in the gentlest way possible. I use a lot of gardening examples, and this is a good place for one. If I have a problem in the garden, bugs or disease, the first thing I reach for is not that industrial strength chemical. I might try a cultural control, like a pest barrier, some sort of fleece cloth, or I might try a biological control, like neem oil. Uh, you may still have to go to that petrochemical, but at least you tried a gentler way first. And the same is true when you are doing baneful magic. Uh, the gentler way in magic is maybe first you do warding or shielding magic. Can you cloak yourself or the person you're trying to help them in this situation? Another gentle way is to create a mirror box. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You take a little box, you buy one at the store, or might have one around the house. You line it with mirrors. You create a poppet and a ritual, and you put the poppet in the box for a full moon cycle. The goal is to get the person to realize that his or her actions are destructive, either to herself or to people around them, and to fix it. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have to take that industrial strength approach. And one final warning, before you do this kind of magic, in my experience, magic always takes the path of least resistance. We've all read those stories about the person who does a spell for money. They were expecting to get a big lottery win, or maybe they thought they were going to find a bag of money on the side of the road. But instead, in a few days, they get word that a relative has passed away and left them some sort of financial inheritance. The implication is that their spell might have hurried the relative on to an untimely death. That may be a little cliche, but I've seen real life consequences in minor ways. For example, I once needed to do a little cleanup around the home here, and it required the use of a chainsaw. And I'm not too keen on using chainsaws, but this work had to be done. There was no one else to do it, and at the time, I couldn't afford to pay someone to do it. So the day that I was going to do the work, I did my meditations that morning. I did a little extra work to ensure that the universe would be looking after me. And then I went to the rental place and I rented the smallest saw that they had that could actually get the work done that I needed. Before I left, we checked the saw out, made sure that the chain was on right and the had gas and everything worked fine. So off I went. I got to the house and I went to do the work, and the machine would not crank. Now, I'm no stranger to using this type of power tool. I don't like to use them, but I do know how to use them. But this thing would not crank for love or money. And I was furious with them. How dare they rent me a piece of equipment that would not work? So I stormed back to the store and asked for a different machine. But they were out of stock. They'd rented them all. So I was out of luck. I eventually got a friend with a chainsaw to help me with the work that I needed done. But it took me several days to realize that the universe had answered my prayers. I was not hurt. I didn't get my work done, but I also didn't cut my leg off with a chainsaw. So again, remember, magic works along the path of least resistance and not always in the way that you anticipate that it will. When you have gotten that far, you've done your divinations, you tried all your other options, and this seems to be the only option that you have left in your toolkit. What do? We have a creed with the House of Akasha, and in the creed it says a couple of the lines in it says, "We weigh our actions long and well, and pay the toll when tolls the bell." It means you are responsible for your actions. You need to ward yourself. You need to shield yourself. I've known a number of people who hire themselves out to do this kind of work. Their lives, to me, what do I know? But they seem to be in various stages of chaos. In my opinion, this is just the universe in action. I'm not saying they deserve to be punished, that they deserve the chaos in their life. I'm saying that like attracts like. You spend a lot of time pushing buttons to create painful outcomes. You shouldn't be surprised when you attract a lot of that into your life. So I would suggest strongly that you be aware of those possibilities, that you make sure your intentions are good, that you take steps to protect yourself, whether you use talismans or herbs, whatever you use, take steps to protect yourself and shield yourself if you have to do this, and be prepared to follow up in the case where you do get some reaction. So that is my presentation for today. I'd love to open it up to see if any of you have any questions that you might have that maybe I can help you with. Maybe I can't. You never know. But by golly, if we can't, we could possibly uh, forward you on to someone else. I would like to say that in my book, The Witch's Guide to Wildcraft, I talk about 30 32 different plants that you can find outside in your yard, in your landscape, or in the area leading up to your house, wherever it may be. Um, and I also include in there a number of things um, a number of things that you can do with those plants. And a very small point to use is excuse me, a very small part of the projects in here do involve baneful magic, but I don't have a whole lot of them in there. Let's see. Natalie B has said, "What is the best way to break a spell that someone has put on you?" Usually, in my experience, it is a good thing to use poke. I'm a very big advocate for poke. Um, it is American mandrake, and it's a strong herb to use to break it. So you set your ritual up to visualize the situation that you're in, and use poke. And I would also suggest dragon's blood to use in your ritual to help break any kind of that negativity that you have found in your life. You can always follow that up by cleansing yourself and your environment with your personal preference, Palo Santo or sage. All of those are good. Samantha, I'm sorry, dear, I'm not going to get your last name right. Velk um, asked, can you type the name of the book in the chat where we talk about the um, tarot spread? That is Modern Magic by Donald Craig. That was printed by Llewellyn, and there it is in the chat. That was printed by Llewellyn, as I said, over 20 years ago. Very good resource, and I've seen more attractive looking copies of it with updated covers as well. But if you can get a copy of that, do. I should also mention that. Uh, I use tarot. I'm very comfortable with using tarot, but you could use other divination methods as well if you are more comfortable with using a pendulum or with using runes. That's always good. Um, Luce, Louise looks like is asking what is a good herb for banishment. There's all kinds of good herbs for banishment. And again, one of my go-tos is poke. Surprisingly, pepper works very well to run folks off. There's a reason why hot peppers are frequently used in some of the African diaspora religions. Um, we have Moon Chica, who says, great talk. Thank you very much, Moon. Would you say that if you want to manifest something good to say for the highest good of all, um, let me make sure I understand that question. Oh, my screen scrolled. Okay. Would you say that if you want to manifest something, it's good to say for the highest good of all? That is one way to go about it. I have occasionally incorporated into my ritual chant, harm no one while in this work, uh, which also seems to help. When you begin to constrain the action you send out, you may have to do it more than once because let's face it, if you're asking the universe just wholesale help me fix this problem, the universe can go about it in whatever method it finds most convenient. But if you start putting constraints on it, don't don't have this guy locked up, I just want him out of my life, then it's going to have to find other workarounds to get to what you want to happen. So that's a good thing to do, Moon, but you can also say harm no one while in this act. Um, let's see here. Is there a good herb to use to get better, more vivid dreams? Of course, the go to for vivid dreaming, lucid dreaming, anything of that sort is always mugwort. Many of the things that are in the Artemisia family. I find there's a plant out there called Perilla, Perilla, that will help you get into a relaxed state. It's not so sedating as, for instance, catnip, for instance, but it helps you to relax. I know some folks like to use kava. I think that's a little bit too much, um, but I think Perilla would be a good one to use, and barring that, mugwort or wormwood, either of those, in a mild tea to help you get to that vivid dream state. See, a lot of people. Oh, yes, Monica. Yes, Phytolacca. That is the American pokeweed. I'm a big advocate for the plant. I use it in banishing work. I take the berries and turn it into an ink. I brew them down for ink, and I talk about the process in my book. And then I blend it with essential oils to make either dragon's blood ink, bat's blood ink, or dove's blood inks. Um, as far as the Amy Huntley asked, are there any particular plants you prefer for midsummer or for Letha? Any of the summer flowering plants. Set your altar up with any of the sun loving plants. I think that a very appropriate one, it has some connotations, but it's appropriate because we had it first. St. John's wort. Uh, that is a midsummer plant, whether you are making an asperging tool to bless the people who are coming or using it with a tea or a wine. You can use it to bless your altar. You can burn it for your ritual incense to honor the solar deities that are active at this time of the years. Uh, this was an interesting question here. Let me get back up to it because we jumped again. Do you believe the saying that what you do to others will return to you three times? This is from Donna. Uh, I think that things come back to you, Donna. I don't know that they come back to you three times. If you persist in it, they will certainly come back to you three times. That's where we borrow a little bit from physics, and we say every for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, and I think that is very true in magic. Uh, let's see. Could you please? This is from Honey Sons. Could you please respell the word you did in the beginning? Akasha, I believe I was a minute late. Bless your heart, honey. Akasha, you have it spelled correctly. It's our organization is House of Akasha, and that is House of Akasha GSO. If you're looking for us on Facebook, let me type that in. Let's see, AKASHAGSO, and just look for us there on Facebook. Um, just got Modern Magic, sweetheart. You this is from Blanca. I just got Modern Magic and will definitely be getting your book. Aren't you sweet? Thank you very much. Again, the name of my book is A Witch's Guide to Wildcraft. Again, I'm trying to explain a number of things in there that people seem to just assume. Not to say that all the other art writers got it wrong. It's just that a lot like cooking, you have people who give you a ritual and they presume that you know some of the basic. In cooking, you look at a cookbook and it will tell you, make this cake and you use milk and you use egg, but it won't often tell you to make sure that the ingredients are at room temperature. They assume you know. It won't tell you that if the recipe calls for eggs, they mean large eggs. They don't mean extra large eggs. They don't mean medium sized eggs. They mean large eggs. So I tried to explain some of the things in this book that I think frequently get taken for granted. Let's see here. I was about to harvest the vervain. All right. Is there a best way I should hang to dry it and preserve it, or other practices I should use? Again, that's something else that we talk about in the book, Witch's Guide to Wildcraft. Obviously, if you have a dryer, that's great because it's slow, gentle heat that will gradually dry your herb and not turn them into dust. They won't be so dry that they're brittle, but they also do a thorough job of drying. You can do it in the oven on the lowest possible setting. Set it on a pan, a cookie sheet. Put paper towels beneath the herb to help to absorb some of that moisture. Do a single layer. Don't pile it in there big and thick, but do a single layer. Put it in the oven. The lowest my oven will do is 170. But if you have, for instance, a gas lit furnace, gas lit stove, the temperature will be a little lower, be closer to around 120, 140. Low, gentle heat is always the best. But I will tell you that in a pinch, you can put a piece of material between two paper towels, put it in a microwave, and hit it for 30 seconds and see if it's dry enough. And if it's not, hit it for another 30 seconds. And that will dry something out very quickly. That's if you're in a pinch. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Let's see here. Can you use a mirror box and pop it on a person's past actions? Well, past is past. Excuse me, that is from April B. Um, sounds like you're looking for retribution. And that's definitely baneful magic. And yeah, you can hold someone accountable for that. You can ask them to realize justice for what they have done. So that is definitely a possibility. Um, and it looks like Naja Lightfoot says it's good to learn about using baneful things, and it is. Some people will say, "Why would you talk about bad stuff? We just won't talk about it and play like it's not there." Uh, you can't do that. It's like sex education in school. You say, well, we just won't tell kids until they're old enough about sex, and they won't do it. Well, we know darn good and well they will. So it's better that they are equipped with the information to protect themselves. Or going out and buying a gun. You can go out and buy a gun off the shelf and shoot your foot off. That didn't do anybody any good. Or you can get the gun and you can go get instructions on how to handle the gun. The same is true with doing baneful magic. You're going to run into a situation where you will need to do this or have someone do this, but you need to be aware of the consequences of doing this kind of stuff. I do. Edie asked, "Do I go into baneful magic in my book?" I have a few things in there. I also talk in the final chapter about some of the consequences of doing this. Just be aware that there will be consequences. Nothing in life is free. If you're going to do this sort of thing, it's something you're just going to have to deal with. Just be prepared to deal with it. Um, Yes, Sprinks. That what an interesting name. It looks like a play on Sphinx. Sprinks has asked, "Love this. Thank you. So very useful. Does your book have info on building a home apothecary?" Yes, ma'am, it does. It tells you how to gather the herbs. I don't talk a lot about medicinal uses for herbs, but I do mention that in some certain context. The wild plant that you everybody finds out in their yard is plankton. Um, and it's used so much these days in skin ointments and healing ointments, and you can use it in magical healing spells as well. So I do talk about it a little bit. Oh, Natalie B, thank you. You are wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much, dear. I've spent 60 years accumulating. I hope I got a little bit of something out of it. And thank you to all of you folks who have expressed gratitude for the presentation and your very sweet comments. I do appreciate that. I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations that are happening. I'm looking forward to seeing many of them myself. And thank you so much to Llewellyn for putting this on. This has been great.